Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. We're really happy to see you here for our fall financial aid training updates. This is something we look forward to each year. And I feel like for a number of years, we've been saying, oh, there's so much more information coming. And that the 2024, 2025 FAFSA year would be the year when this all would happen. And we were looking forward to it and thinking about it. And oh my goodness, here we are. So let's talk about our goals. We're going to talk about FAFSA and federal student aid updates, and that will take up a lot of our time. We're also going to talk about education loans and some updates, as well as information resources available for you to use. So let's get started. Oh my gosh, with the updates. Here we are. Since last time we met, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Limited Waiver expired on October 31st last year, so just under a year ago. And what was interesting was almost $33 billion was forgiven as a result of this limited waiver. And the total forgiven for all public service loan forgiveness programs so far is $34.3 billion. So a lot of savings for borrowers there. The final extension happened for the federal student loan pause. Interest resumed accruing on September 1st and has been beginning in October. Some of you may be restarting your repayment of student loans. And my son, who is a recent college graduate, has also just begun too. So I'm hearing his tales about that. Other changes since we last met, there was a restoration of the Pell lifetime eligibility used for successful borrower defense claims and certain loan discharges. And what that meant was that students who had a borrower defense claim or had their loans discharged for certain reasons got their Pell lifetime eligibility reset. So if they had used up all six, I think it's, what is it, five? It's like 6 years of Pell Grant full time. If a person had used up some or all of that under a borrower defense claim, they could get that reestablished. It also established Pell eligibility for confined or incarcerated individuals in prison education programs, also called PEP. The FAFSA delay was announced for the 2024-2025 school year. We have been told it will be available in December of 2023. As for the actual date, your guess is as good as mine. I would like to say I do not know any more than anyone else when the date it will open. Although people would love to, ask me if it's going to be the 1st or the 5th or the 15th. I have no idea yet. As soon as we know, you will know. The Biden-Harris administration student debt relief plan was defeated in a Supreme Court judgment. And there have been updates made to the federal student aid website. You may have seen them if you've been on them with students or had to use them yourself. Studentaid.gov, and including this thing called the Federal Student Aid Estimator. I checked the other day, it was up, interestingly enough, and so it actually will give an SAI an estimated aid based on what we know right now. So the federal student aid website is updated on a pretty regular basis, but the login or create an account is still in the same place. And so for people who, when we're talking about the FSA ID and people needing that FSA ID, what I'd like you to know is when federal student aid talks about creating an account, that is what they're talking about. So let's talk for a minute about why complete the FAFSA. I think if you have been doing this as long as I have, which not many people have, but okay. People will come up to me at presentations, they'll come up to me at events and they'll say, we don't think we qualify for aid, but why should we do this? Well, because it's required. You should fill out the FAFSA. It's required if you want any federal student aid programs, including having access to federal student loans. You also need to file a FAFSA to be considered for the Vermont full-time and part-time grant programs. And it could also be required for institutional financial aid and for scholarships. And so there's that, why bother, right? Students can qualify for federal loans. They might qualify for work study. They could qualify for institutional aid because a student could be showing financial need. They may not be eligible for a federal Pell Grant. They might not be eligible for a Vermont grant, but depending on the institution, they may be eligible for aid from them, especially when you think about, the cost of some of these colleges right now. It's also the way that you can communicate special circumstances to colleges. The FAFSA is a just the facts document, and it comes up with this thing called an SAI, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you have changes to your family income from what you had to report on the FAFSA, or you have a change in marital status, or there's additional expenses not reflected on the FAFSA, gosh, we've had a lot of communities in Vermont impacted this summer by flooding. And so any expenses not covered by FEMA could be something that families could appeal. But to start that conversation, you have to file a FAFSA. So let's give you a few FAFSA facts. There are two ways a student can file a FAFSA: using a computer or mobile device at fafsa.gov, or you can go to studentaid.gov and click on complete a FAFSA. That gives you the option right from there. More than 99% of students file a FAFSA electronically. That is the way most people do it. But there is also a paper application. You can find a PDF on the studentaid.gov website, download it, print it, and fill it out, sign it, submit it. What I'd like you to know is, just like the delay with the regular FAFSA, the paper application is also delayed. So, you're not able to fill it out any faster by using the paper application. One other thing I want to say is we're going to talk a whole lot about FAFSA simplification and how much easier the FAFSA is going to be. FAFSA simplification has not made it to the paper form. The paper form is 21 pages long. So please consider carefully when someone says to you, I really want to do the paper application, because there's a whole bunch more involved with filling that out. With the new FAFSA, there's some new terminology that we're going to learn, and we're going to talk about those today. Contributor, student aid index, the Future Act, direct data exchange. It's called the FADDX because everyone in federal student aid loves their acronyms. And also the FAFSA submission summary. And we're going to talk about a lot of those today. The FAFSA.gov website, the FAFSA website is different. And what you'll notice is they have a place for the 2024-2025 form, where once that comes up, there'll be a place for it. And they actually have the 2023-2024 form in a different place. So you have the opportunity, for people who are starting and needing to apply for financial aid for January of 2024, that FAFSA will still be up for the current school year, but we will have the new form up in just a slightly different place. This is also a roles-based form. And so when a person logs into their FAFSA with their FSA ID or their federal student aid account, it will say welcome in the person's name, and it will ask you, like, how are you starting this form? And I'm starting this form as a student, or I'm starting this form as a parent. So it is definitely roles-based. And I'm going to hand over some of the definitions to my esteemed colleague, Stacy King.
Thanks, Carrie. So one of our new terms is contributor, and Carrie and I are working really hard to help people make that terminology contributor of information. So it's a person required to contribute information on a student's FAFSA. Obviously, the student themselves. For dependent students, this year, 24-25, it is the household who provided more financial support in the last year. So it used to be who the student had lived with more in the calendar year. That is not the case anymore. It's who provided greater financial support in the last year. And when you have family, say it's equal, 50-50, then it is the parent who has higher income in the assets who is supposed to fill out the FAFSA. There is a really cool embedded parent wizard tool within the FAFSA now where a student will answer questions about their family, and that will help them identify who should go on their FAFSA as a contributor. Those dependent students, if they begin the FAFSA, will invite parents as contributors. Independent students may invite a spouse if they are married and they did not file married filing jointly. Next slide. Can we make the slide go forward, Karen? Sorry about that. The other unique difference this year in 24-25, while there are no changes to determining student dependency, so the same criteria for dependency still exist, or independency, an update to the unaccompanied and homeless or at risk of being homeless question now has director or designee of a project supported by a federal TRIO or Gear Up program ranked as one of the entities that can verify homelessness or at risk of being homeless. And for all of our TRIO partners, we would like to direct you to your director to find out the process and how they would like to manage that role if it becomes an issue for you, not an issue, but an opportunity for you. If none of the criteria apply, there is no one who can answer those situations, there is the opportunity for the student to reach out to the financial aid administrator to set up an interview to try to determine if they qualify for an independent status. And for independent students, they are a contributor themselves, obviously. Also their spouse if they are married. And new in 24-25, a student who has unusual circumstances which prevents them from accessing or preventing parents from putting information in, that can now be reported directly in the FAFSA. So this is what some of you may think of as dependency override questions. They're now listed within the FAFSA, and a student who answers yes to any of them can be categorized as provisionally independent, and a provisional student aid index will be calculated and award will be calculated. But these will require further documentation and approval from a financial administrator at a college. So just saying yes to it does not make you independent, but it does allow a student to begin that process right with instead of starting separately. And what if a student who is dependent doesn't fit any of the independency criteria and does not have unusual circumstances? What if they cannot get parent information? We all have had that experience. There is now an opportunity within the FAFSA to say, I cannot get parent information and I would like to access an unsubsidized federal student loan only. And that it has always been an option for students to do that. However, this required additional paperwork, and now it is embedded within the FAFSA and will require no additional paperwork. All right, and now updates. All of those contributors, the student spouse if relevant, the parent spouse if relevant, will need an FSA ID. And the FSA ID can no longer be made and used in the same day. It has to be verified before it can be used to access a FAFSA. That is going to take somewhere between 3 on the upside and probably 5 to 7 business days. And once it is processed, applicants do receive an email that it is active and ready to be used. If contributors are married and they filed a married filing joint return in the prior year that is asked for on the FAFSA, only one of those people needs to create an FSA ID and sign and submit the FAFSA. If they are unmarried but live together, both parents would need an FSA ID. If contributor parents are married and they file taxes separately, both will need an FSA ID. If they are recently married and filed separate tax returns for the prior year, whether both parents of dependent students or if we're talking about an independent student who was recently married, both members of those couple need an FSA ID. And if contributors are not U.S. citizens or permanent residents, they are going to be able to get an FSA ID by using another service, a TransUnion credit questionnaire process to establish identity. And this is the only FSA ID that actually will be active immediately if they are successful in answering those questions. So those are the parents or not students themselves, but spouses that may not have a social security number or maybe from the freely associated territories.
And Stacy, I just wanted to add one thing. That is that on the most recent FAFSA in the past, if a parent didn't have a social security number, they could sign a signature page, or if a parent didn't have an FSA ID, they could sign a signature page. The signature page has gone away. So everyone who would need to sign needs FSA ID.
Correct. And they need it before they try to fill out FAFSA. All right. I think this is this back to you, Carrie? Or would you like me to continue this section?
Sure. So when we're talking about FAFSA simplification, right? It is supposed to be a shorter electronic form with fewer questions starting with this year. That's the excitement of the new FAFSA. Contributors will actually consent to a direct transfer of information from the IRS. That's that FADDX. And you might remember in the past that families had to actually go to a separate website, right? They linked to the IRS. They had to put in everything perfectly, and then the IRS information could be brought into the FAFSA. This process is going to be much more direct now. When a person gives consent, that will happen automatically with that FSA ID. So there are some exceptions to this, though. So if there was a recent marital status change since filing taxes, for instance, if a person got separated or divorced and they had a married filing joint return, they would need to in manually their information, because there is no way for federal student aid to figure out from the IRS who earned what. And also victims of identity theft will not be able to use that process. But consent has to be given, regardless of whether the contributor filed taxes or whether they have an exception preventing them from doing the direct transfer. They still have to give consent. Without consent, all required contributors, without consent from all the required contributors, there's not going to be any federal aid to be awarded. With the exception of that unsubsidized loan, if a student says, I cannot get my parent information and want to be considered. The other change that's happening is family size will come from the person's claimed on taxes. And so we know that sometimes the people claimed on taxes is not a direct reflection of who's really living in and being supported in that household. So if it is different, if the family size is different, the student and the parent need to answer family size questions on the FAFSA instead of just trusting that the information from the IRS is good. Another change is that expected family contribution is changing. That whole terminology is changing to a student aid index, or SAI. It's a new formula that's used to calculate eligibility for need-based aid, except for the maximum Pell Grant. Interestingly enough, the maximum Pell Grant eligibility is based on adjusted gross income, whether it's a single or dual parent household, the household size, and poverty guidelines. And so you'll notice that the print here is slightly different. It's a different color. When we produce the slideshow for you, you will be able to click on this link and it will bring you directly to the document. And if you look at page 2, you could see for dependent students what the if my income is less than this and my family size is this, and I have a single parent household, my student's going to be eligible for maximum Pell Grant. It's going to be much easier in a way. Eligibility for minimum Pell Grant is also based on the adjusted gross income, whether it's a single or dual parent household, the number of people living in the house, those poverty guidelines and the amount of the maximum Pell Grant. And it's the same link that you would use above, but the minimum Pell Grant is on page 4. And what they have said at Federal Student Aid is that Pell eligible students will receive the higher of minimum Pell or the SAI determination of Pell. So if the SAI determination of Pell says it's going to be something higher than the minimum Pell Grant, then the student will get that. But if the SAI determination says, oh, not Pell eligible, nope, we go back to that minimum Pell Grant table and students would be eligible for at least a minimum Pell Grant. Another big change, electronically up to 20 colleges can be listed on the new FAFSA. Woo! And please, if a student's applying to more than 20 colleges, well, I shouldn't give my opinion on that. The paper form only has room for 10 now. Asset information, FAFSA filers will now have to report business and/or farm equity if they have that. That wasn't something that had to be reported before. They did have to be reported for the Vermont grant application. So the Vermont grant's no longer going to ask for that, but the business or farm equity will have to show up starting with this year's FAFSA. On the FAFSA, the equity is called net value. And what they mean is the amount they could expect if they sold the assets of the business or farm minus the debt held against those assets directly. So, you know, I have worked with families who say our business is a delivery business. We have a van that we bought for $500 2 years ago. I would say pull out your Kelley Blue Book and take a look at what that would be worth. If the family, though, has completed the consent and their federal adjusted gross income is below $60,000, generally assets won't even be counted in that SAI calculation. So even if you have to report it, you may not have to, it may not be something that comes into your SAI calculation. Also, if the parent indicates any federal means tested benefits in the prior 2 years, the assets are also not counted. And that includes if a student attends a school where 100% of the students get free or reduced lunch, they can say yes to that free or reduced lunch question on the FAFSA and qualify for that. There are also some process changes. Students and parents will enter the FAFSA separately. They're going to fill out their information. The student will invite contributors, or the parent can invite the student as a contributor and then sign. Contributors will not be able to see other contributor information. So if you have parents going in separately, they won't see each other's information. You won't see a student seeing parent information. Parents won't see the student information. The student needs the correct date of birth, social security number, and the legal names of contributors in order to invite them. They need the name that's on the social security card. Any viable email is fine. It doesn't have to be the email on the FSA ID. The contributor doesn't even need to have an FSA ID yet to get invited. If the student makes an error, then the error has to be fixed by the student in that invitation process. Contributors with FSA ID will be able to log in. They'll see the invite on their dashboard when they log in. So if a parent contributor logged in and a student had invited them, they would actually see it when they logged into their FAFSA. The last contributor in will have the option to submit the FAFSA, but the ability to submit won't appear until all the contributors have consented and they've completed their sections. So everybody has to be done, everything has to be completed, and then that submit button will show.
Carrie, while we're here, can I interrupt with a great opportunity for a question?
Sure thing.
We had one come in that I think is an excellent clarifying opportunity. And I'm going to read the question as it came in word for word. I heard that contributor has also been expanded and that all persons associated with the household, essentially under the new definition of household, are required to be contributors for the FAFSA application. Is this incorrect? And they do go on to clarify that the example is maybe if the student has an uncle that lives in the home, does that uncle then need to be a FAFSA contributor as well as the parents perhaps?
So a contributor for the FAFSA is really for a dependent student, the student's biological or adoptive parents. If that parent is remarried, it is the parent and step parent, and it's the person who provided more financial support. I think we're about to get to that change. So I'd love to maybe talk a little bit more about that. But yes, there are some changes with that. It is not everyone who's in the household. It's really the students, they go to the student's biological or adoptive parent.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, so just to echo that, not an uncle, not a grandparent, unless that grandparent has legally adopted that child. No, not a legal guardian, only an adoptive or biological parent, and then that parent's spouse if necessary.
Thank you both. No other questions at this time.
Okay. So remember the student aid report. I think we all kind of remember the student aid report. Those of us who work with students sometimes use that to look at, okay, which schools did we send the FAFSA to? What is that in the past? What is that EFC? So there is now a FAFSA submission summary, and we're showing an example of one here, but at the top of the page, it has the FAFSA form and the FAFSA submission summary. And then right below it, there are some tabs. And so we're highlighting the eligibility overview, and you can see that a student will be able to see their estimated Pell Grant, estimated federal loan. For federal work study, it says you may be eligible. And so that information is there. There's also the FAFSA form answers. So if students wanted to review what the questions and answers were, they can. But remember, they won't see contributor information. That will probably be masked. So income information will definitely be masked. And also next steps. You can see for this, there's a little exclamation point. So next steps might be that there's more information that's needed, or maybe that the student was chosen for verification or something like that. So we want to talk a little bit about the delay in this year's FAFSA, right? It means changes to timelines. This is for 1 year only. This year, they're having to revamp this entire system in order to get the IRS to talk to FAFSA directly. That in itself is a really big lift. So this year's FAFSA delay will only be for this year. Next year, we're back to October 1st with the FAFSA opening, she says with confidence. So for this year, let's think about this a little bit. Early decision students should be looking to colleges for CSS profile application requirements and deadlines. Those early decision students a lot of times need to have that complete in order to get that initial financial aid notification from the colleges for their early decision acceptance and whether or not they can afford the school and can commit. Some colleges will not be using the CSS profile. I'm thinking of in Vermont, Champlain and UVM. They are not going to be able to do a financial aid award without financial information. While waiting for the FAFSA to open, though, students and first-time filing parents need to create those FSA IDs. And so if a parent had an FSA ID in the past for an older child, that FSA ID still exists for them. They only need a new one if they haven't gotten one before. And I want to mention that we are offering virtual and in-person FSA ID sign-up help through the VSAC Resource Center this fall. That is happening right now. You want to create a MyVSAC account for the student and file the 2024-2025 Vermont grant application, because guess what? The delay in the FAFSA hasn't delayed that application, and it's relatively easy to file. In November, we're recommending that students start researching and applying for those VSAC assistance scholarships. My understanding is that the book is online. I've taken a look at it on our website, but also that we are in the process of mailing those out to schools and agencies right now. If you have not ordered them, you can go to our publications website and you can order scholarship books to be sent. In December, sometime the FAFSA will open. Some people will want to jump right on that FAFSA and get it done immediately, and I totally understand that. There's need to get it done. It's opening in December. The deadline is not December. And so if I were offering my personal advice, I would say the first week, let things be, let other people find the mistakes or the bugs that need to be fixed, and then go in. In January 24, we are recommending that students and families watch for financial aid forms nights at high schools where we will be available to help. Again, families have to have those FSA IDs. They have to have created those accounts in order to even begin a FAFSA. So the FAFSA form night, there is really guidance that we need to give to students and families about that. VSAC will also offer virtual and in-person FAFSA help through the VSAC Resource Center. February 14th of 2024 is the VSAC Assisted Scholarships deadline. FAFSAs must be filed by midnight of that day for scholarships with a financial need component. So we do have a FAFSA, although we don't really have a FAFSA deadline for the Vermont Grant Program. If you want to be considered for a financially need-based through VSAC, you should have that FAFSA filed by the end of the day, February 14th, 2024. Another thing that students can be doing is in December, when the FAFSA opens, they could be working on their VSAC scholarships application. The application's relatively easy, but most students need an essay, and many students will also need recommendations. So it's a great idea while you're waiting for things to happen to work on those other things, so you're not necessarily jammed up. How about those questions?
We have a couple that come in through the chat, so this is a great time for them. Going back to some of the FAFSA specific questions that you were mentioning, 2 years ago, all students were eligible for free and reduced lunch in Vermont. Does this mean all students may or should select yes to that question on the FAFSA?
They certainly can.
Yeah, they may.
Excellent. The other question that came through, what if the legal guardian is appointed by the state and has not adopted the student? Who files as the contributor?
Just the student. A student who's in a legal guardianship with someone other than a parent meets one of those independent criteria. And so it's just the student, unless that student is married, in which case their spouse.
And they may be required to provide a copy of that legal documentation to the college's financial aid office as well.
If they are chosen for verification or the college requests it, yes, but not automatically.
And then just a general update, it looks like the VSAC scholarship booklets have, they ran out on the website as of yesterday. It does look like they should be back in stock on October 16th. So just to anybody who's interested, you can still go in and pre-order, but it looks like they'll be back in stock soon. And those are all the questions that we had come in during this last segment. Thank you.
All right, do you want me to take this, Carrie?
Sure, if you would like to, that would be great.
Sure. All right, so let's do a little review of education loans and see what's different for this year. All right, so our 23-24 current academic year direct loan interest rates and origination fees, and we like to bring this up just to remind people the interest rate for every academic year is set at the end of June, typically somewhere around there, and that the origination fee is taken out of the loan before it is actually awarded to a student's account, so it's slightly less than the $5,500, for example, for a freshman. I'm sorry, Carrie, you're gonna have to do the numbers for me. How much actually goes on the account?
So $5,442.
There you go. And then you can see there is also the PLUS loan here, parent loan for undergraduate students at a significantly higher interest rate and origination fee. So it's really important for the families that are budgeting down to the dollar to calculate that in to what will actually be awarded to their account.
And just to give you an idea, a $5,000 plus loan will actually mean $4,789 is what gets paid to the college or trade school.
In addition to the federal direct student loans, there are also non-federal student loans, including through VSAC, such as the Advantage loan. You can see the range of interest rates there. And then other nonprofit organizations, banks, credit unions can offer alternative loans. Often these are called private student loans. And we remind people every year to really check the details of those student loan options. The rates offered may be teaser rates, they may be variable rates, or they may be, you could qualify for as low as, but then when you apply, your rate is actually much higher than the low as advertised. You do not have to take a loan that you have applied for if it is not in a reasonable rate for you to repay. So I encourage you always compare these loans. And I see July 1, it wasn't end of June. July 1, the U.S. Department of Education will set the new rate for 24-25. The parent loan options, similar. There is a federal option through your college. When you fill out the FAFSA, you will have been requesting the ability to do that, though not the actual loan. And then that interest rate again will be set on July 1st for 24-25. You can compare that to the non-federal loans such as VSAC's parent loan or other nonprofit banks, credit unions. Look at the details again and also understand what benefits each entity can offer in terms of income-based repayment, forbearance, or other benefits for borrowers. And we do have a great publication, which I think might be the next slide.
Actually, it isn't.
It's not.
Never mind. Smart.
But we do have a great publication called My Education Loans, which helps explain the different options for loans and compare them. And it is not a advertisement for VSAC private loans. It's really a description of all the different options and what you want to consider as you take out an education loan. One of the new opportunities for the federal loans are a save repayment plan, saving on a valuable education. And this is replacing one of the other repayment plans called Repay or Revised Pay As You Earn. And this helps identify a repayment amount that is based on both income and family size. So, and the income that is protected from that calculation has increased to 225% of poverty line, and it eliminates 100% of remaining interest after a scheduled payment is made. So interest is not accruing faster than someone is paying their scheduled repayment back. It does exclude spousal income for borrowers who are married but filed separately, which can be an advantage for some families. And the loans that are eligible for the SAVE plan are the subsidized and unsubsidized direct student loans, plus loans made to graduate or professional students, and direct consolidation loans that did not repay plus loans made by two parents. So parent plus loans, unfortunately, are not in this opportunity for repayment, but this will decrease repayment for many families.
The other thing about this SAVE repayment plan is that borrowers with less than $12,000 in debt will be able to, if they're part of this SAVE repayment plan, will have the remainder of their debt forgiven after 10 years. Normally it could be up to 20 years. But the thinking is that, you know, people, for instance, who graduate from community college and they have debt should not be, you know, having to pay for 20 years on it. And so that is one of the things that is part of this new SAVE plan. And the education loans book.
There's a great loan book. There's the My VSAC education loan book. So this can also be ordered on the website in the publications, and you can find it on our, you can download it from our website as well. It does have loan calculators, and you can compare the VSAC student loans and the VSAC parent loans and other private loans. It's really a great resource for thinking about all the components when you're going to borrow for school.
And I will also add, I think a lot of times when we do forms nights, for instance, at high schools and with different organizations, when parents come in, they are sometimes asking about applying for loans that night. The loan application process really happens later in the process. It usually happens in the late spring, early summer of the student's senior year of high school, and then late spring, early summer each college year, because people apply for loans each year that they want that funding. And so it's really important to remember that this is something that happens later on once students have heard about all of their financial aid and they need to think about additional funding options.
And sometimes people ask how much time is needed to get a private loan in place, and that will vary according to the lender. So 6 to 8 weeks is a comfortable window, but it can be done quicker than that. It really depends on how quickly people respond to requests for documentation. And some great resources when thinking about borrowing. The Mapping Your Future site has a debt wizard, which helps a student look at their debt load compared to the expected salary in their field in the first entry level area, so that they can think about whether taking that amount of loan is going to be affordable to pay back. There are similar loan simulators on the studentaid.gov site. This will let you compare the same repayment plan to a graduated repayment plan or a traditional repayment plan to see what makes the most sense and how much interest you will accrue in each scenario. And then VSAC shows you how, as excellent examples. That's not the right term. What term am I going for, Carrie? Tutorial. Never mind. I came up with it. Sorry. An extra tutorial on how to review your education loans. And that one is usually done by Carrie, right? Yeah, so great option there. Questions about loans?
Nothing has come in through the chat or Q&A.
All right.
So let's talk about some of those information resources that we promised you. On our website, of course, the EdPro News has regular updates. We also have the financial aid resources for education professionals. And as we get things, we update that. So when the new FAFSA comes in, we will have the PDF FAFSA available here. We'll also have additional information, the recording. This is the spot where the recording of these workshops will be, and also copies of the PowerPoints that you can get to. We talked about publication orders, and so publications.vac.org. You can order materials, or you can even download digital versions if you want to put something on your organization or your school's website. You can also track the shipping status of your order, and you can also receive order reminders from VSAC as well. The FAFSA demo system. The FAFSA demo system will probably be up sometime in December 2023. It usually comes up a few days before people will be able to access the FAFSA, and the demo will be able to let you go through. They will give you social security numbers and FSA ID information and go in and kind of play with the system and see how it works. But also the SAI, if you type in Federal Aid Estimator on your browser, you can find Federal Student Aid's Federal Aid Estimator, which will actually also lead you through the process, and you can put in information. It's really a quick and easy. It's not the application. It's not how the application will look, but it's a nice way for families to maybe get an early for what could possibly be eligible for.
We have not had any additional questions coming through the chat or Q&A.
Wow, okay.
So I would just
Go ahead, Stacey.
throw a summary in there, Carrie.
What's that?
I just want to throw a summary in there. The big changes for this year, FSA ID needs to be established ahead of time and verified by Social Security Administration, or someone without a Social Security number can complete a TransUnion credit questionnaire process right within that FSA ID application. And also, we're delayed till December. We don't win in December, taking bets in the TRIO world. And those who go on the FAFSA are called contributors of information. And it is the student's spouse, if relevant, or if the student is dependent, it is the household that provides more financial support. And the adult within that household who is their parent or legal adoptive parent, and that person's spouse if they have. I think that does it. Majority of it.
Can I add one other minor piece to FSA ID creation? Stacey and Carrie mentioned beautifully the process and the timeline for getting it verified, and for those who may not have a Social Security number registered to the US do have a workaround method. I do want to provide a point of clarification that those with a Social Security number cannot opt to create an FSA ID using the TransUnion credit verification process. You will have to do the traditional process and wait the 5-ish business days in order for that to register.
Thanks, Chris.
Still no other questions or Q&As in the chat here. Oh, no, we just had one question come up. Will students still receive an SAI on their SAR?
So there's no SAR, there's no student aid report. It is now the FAFSA submission summary, and they have asked us not to use an acronym for that, which, okay. It's the FAFSA submission summary. And I don't know if they see their SAI on the FAFSA submission summary because I have not seen that more in depth. But I will tell you that when I used the federal student aid estimator, it did show the SAI. So you would possibly see that there.
I believe it is on the FAFSA submission summary. It will give the estimated Pell amount, estimated student loans, and the SAI.
That was the only other question to come in at this time.
Wonderful. So we had planned this to last longer. And so I hope that you will be able to have that gift of having a bunch of time back. But what I would also love to tell you is that Stacey's and my contact information is up there. You are certainly welcome to follow up with more questions that you have. When we did this presentation with VSAC staff, we actually took quite a bit longer, didn't we, Stacey?
Yes.
we went over time. So we appreciate your attendance today, your attention today. I also want to make a plug for October 24th, which is our VSAC and state updates. Really important to attend that. We have a lot of different sorts of aid programs that are new that VSAC is helping stand up that we can talk about for Vermont students. And it's pretty exciting. So I hope you will also join us for that presentation as well. Thanks for being with us today.